This episode is brought to you by Atlassian. Atlassian makes the team collaboration software that powers enterprise businesses around the world, including over 80% of the Fortune 500. With Atlassian's AI-powered software like Jira, Confluence, and Loom, you'll have more time to do the work that matters. In fact, Atlassian customers experience a 25% reduction in project duration per year. Unleash the potential of your team at Atlassian.com. Atlassian.
This episode is brought to you by Merrill. Join one of the most iconic names in wealth management, Merrill. You'll be part of a dynamic team of advisors and specialists working hard every day to grow their clients' wealth. And with the support of best-in-class research, advanced digital tools, and the resources of a global institution, it's truly an opportunity you can be bullish about. Learn more at careers.bankofamerica.com. Copyright 2024, Bank of America Corporation.
Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode, and I've got a fantastic guest for you, Victoria Yampolsky, and she is a serial entrepreneur, and she is the president and founder of the Startup Station, which is a CFO advisory and finance education platform for startups and small businesses. And I love having entrepreneurs on the show talk about their businesses, their work, what they're doing, and it's going to be a fantastic conversation for startup founders, entrepreneurs, and I'm happy to welcome her to the show. So, Victoria, welcome.
Hi, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah. So set the stage, talk about your story, your background, how you got started, and we'll dive right into the conversation.
Sure. I began my career in consulting. I wasn't in finance. I have a computer science degree. And I happened to be in financial services. So after 3 years of doing that, I decided to switch into finance directly. And I went to business school and then spent a few years working on Wall Street. And neither of those jobs gave me enough fulfillment because I have a very creative mind as well as technical, whereas both of the corporate jobs, especially because they were more on the junior level, they focused only on the quantitative side of my brain without giving me a lot of opportunities to pursue the creative side. And so after 3 years on Wall Street, I decided to quit my very lucrative job to start another job that didn't pay me anything. And that started my journey into entrepreneurship. I founded a media financing company. I wanted to get into film, because my background, before I started all of these quantitative endeavors, I was an actress for quite a long time growing up, and I always had interest in creative arts. And I wanted to combine my financial acumen and business acumen with an area where I felt passionate about, which was media and entertainment. And so I started the media financing company. I found a producing partner who optioned a slate of films. I went down a journey of trying to raise money for a portfolio of films, and got it to some point, but eventually failed. And this was a big milestone in my journey because I have never failed that badly at that point in my life. I went to good colleges, I got good jobs, I got good grades. I had never been in a situation where what I wanted just didn't work out, and I let down so many people in the result. And I considered that to be a very painful but necessary lesson in my journey, not only as an entrepreneur, but also as a human being, because it allowed me to gain more humility and get a more handle on my ego, knowing that I don't know, I don't have all the answers, I'm not always right. And there are a couple of other lessons that I learned in terms of putting together the right team and validating product market fit, doing things step by step, as opposed to trying to raise 165 million, which is what I tried to raise the first time as the beginner raise, etc. And so that idea, that experience by working with producers who had, in my producer specifically, but I met other producers before I found my partner along the way. So this experience of working with creative people who had a vision for their film, but really often had no idea how to monetize it, who would watch it, how to distribute it. It gave me an idea to use the same approach to startup in the startup world, because a lot of startup founders, they're also very passionate people. It's just that their idea is not a film, but rather a product or a service or an app or a website that does something. And also often, because their background is not financial or business, they also have no idea how to bring it to market. And so that's how the Startup Station was born. It's celebrating 10 years this year. It began as a consultancy that was focused on both strategic and financial planning, transitioned to financial planning fairly early on because I realized that either people know what cash flow is or not, so it was easier to explain to people how I can help them. And then in 2015, we added the education arm. I began teaching workshops in New York City, explaining financial principles to founders, accounting, financial modeling, startup finance, valuation. Because a lot of founders can't necessarily hire a consultant in the beginning stages, and yet they still need to raise money and speak to investors and understand what they're saying and speak to them in the same terms that investors would expect as well. And so that startup, that arm has grown as well. I had 2 meetups in New York and Boston, totaling 5,000 people. I taught workshops every month, sometimes in the rooms of 40 people. In 2018, I launched my classes online, and they're still available. And now it has grown to 7 classes. It's a whole curriculum that can teach founders that at the very early stages, pre-revenue stages, how to build a financial model and how to value their startup and go through the whole fundraising process. And then recently, I decided to focus on the female entrepreneurship and the gender funding gap. And we are launched another program that we're fundraising for at the moment that focuses on female founders, female-led ventures that are at the stage where they've raised their first round of capital and they need to scale. And it's a combination of training in strategy, sales and finance, coaching, access to network, which will improve access to investment and data collection. And finally, I'm also getting involved in advocacy efforts, which I'm very excited about. There was a law passed in California this year called SB 54 that requires all VC funds to disclose how they invest, which will make it clear if they just invest in white men or they also invest in other races or genders or sexual orientation. And that will be required for any fund that's headquartered in California or invest in companies that does business in California. So it covers actually a lot of funds outside of California as well. So I want to pass the same law in New York, which is another financial capital. And I have a meeting with the chief of staff of my assemblyman next week to discuss how to move it forward. So it gives me a lot of joy to be involved in those efforts as well, because I believe in equitable access to capital for anybody who deserves it. Yeah, so that's the journey that I've been on. It's definitely been a whirlwind. And funnily enough, I'm back into the film world. I am executive producing one movie. Now I know a lot more, and I'm only responsible for the finance side of things. And we have a team of people who have other expertise available. And I hope to see it to fruition in the next 12 to 18 months in terms of getting fine. So yeah, that's my journey. The Startup Station, to conclude, provides 2 types of services. One is consulting. You can either be fundraising or you can have a company that experiences a certain problem. You can be in a turnaround stage or growth stage or just raise money, you need to figure out how to use your capital efficiently in a situation where you either don't have financial data or your financial data is not going to help you to understand what the future looks like. This is my expertise. And also we have the education arm where if you want to learn about finance, you want to learn accounting, you want to learn some valuation concepts, so you want to learn about startup finance, you can take those courses and educate yourself.
Yeah, well, very interesting introduction. And I want to talk about this idea because you talked about a lot of things that resonated and Wall Street and the kind of this glass ceiling with white men. And so talk about this, sharing the inspiration behind founding the Startup Station. And then basically this Startup Station's approach to strategic financial modeling. How does it differ from traditional methods? Why is it particularly effective for startups and small businesses?
Sure. So the approach is different in a way that we look at models as the brains of the company. And it makes it easier for me to create this approach and to build those models with my team because of my computer science background. What we're really focused on is, and I apologize for the siren, I don't know if you can hear it. We are in New York City, so that's a little reminder of the Big Apple. We don't hear birds, but we hear sirens. But the approach centers on the premise that you need to establish a clear link between strategic decisions and financial results. And so this involves really understanding what the strategy is like from the operational perspective, from the sales perspective, from the product development perspective, and translating it into the inputs for the financial model, and then creating a logic that would convert those inputs into the resulting financial outcomes. Oftentimes, CFOs come from accounting background, and the way that they build models doesn't have this layer of logic. And what happens as a result is that there is a big disjoint between what your financial expectations are and what the company is actually doing. In fact, I had a client who came to me after they'd already been in a bad situation. They raised $20 million. They had a CFO on board. They have wasted $17 million because they were never able to meet their sales forecast. Their model was showing one thing and their sales team was doing something else. And no matter how many times the model was updated, because it didn't implement the logic, the go-to-market strategy of how they were converting clients and what was that process look like and how long it took and how many resources it required, they were never able to meet any numbers. This is the major thing that our approach to financial modeling solves. The other problem is that sometimes when you have to scale, certain parts of your business will scale with it and some will remain fixed. For example, you will always need an executive team. Doesn't matter if your business scales or doesn't scale, but certain parts of it, like computer science department or operations or maybe product development team, will scale as your revenue scales. If you don't set up the logic in your model that will link those positions to what happens with your revenue, you will have a model that doesn't properly show what is the cost of maintaining your level of sales. And as you program various scenarios in the model, it's not going to give you a complete picture of what your profitability looks like. Because most CFOs, like I said, don't have a programming background and don't think about it in a way where you think of the model as the brain of the company that is interconnected and all the dependencies are clearly identified, oftentimes a lot of things are hard-coded. And so the models are inflexible and as a result, show distorted information. Now, the power of such models is twofold. As you're fundraising, it's a great communication tool to investors because you can show exactly why you think you're going to realize your revenues. What is your path to profitability? How are you going to deploy the funds? How are you going to make sure you're going to reach the next milestone? And the conversation becomes not about, oh, these numbers don't make sense because you know how they happen through the logic, but rather than, do I agree with the strategic decisions? Do I think that those decisions make sense? It's a completely different conversation on the strategy side of the company, as opposed to throwing out numbers because they don't look credible. And on the execution side, once you implement this model in the financial system, so you track the inputs and then you do the reconciliation on a monthly basis, you understand very clearly which parts of your strategy have worked and which didn't. And it becomes this very powerful business intelligence tool, which allows you to react in a very granular way to market feedback and make surgical corrections to your company strategy where they need to be made and understand it a lot sooner before you waste capital and money.
Yeah. Fascinating. And you obviously have a lot of expertise and skill based on your background. And then, so talking about as a fractional CFO, what common financial challenges do you see startups facing and how do you help them navigate these challenges?
Sure. One of the challenges I've described is their deficiency in building models that can really help them run their business efficiently, right? If you don't build the models in a way that they're going to help you uncover information, then you're going to miss that information. So for example, if you don't build a model that properly models your sales expectations, you will always be in a situation where you don't understand why you're not generating the growth that you want to generate. Even if you generate it, you may not be able to replicate it because you don't really understand which decisions led to that result. On the cost side, you may be in a situation where you're driving growth, but because you have not completely thought through what it's going to take to maintain that growth, you may start running into cash flow issues. One of the examples I like to give is a product company that came to me in a turnaround situation, and they were growing on the top line. So it was a company that was selling fertility vitamins to women. And their new CEO came and then she focused on growth. And what she failed to account for is that the inventory ordering cycle was 6 months, which meant that she needed to buy her growth out of the whatever funds she had available 6 months in advance. And so what began happening is that she began growing, her cash began to dwindle. And before she knew it, she was in a turnaround situation where she needed to take loans on terms that were not exactly the best. And she needed to go to the owner and explain to the doctor, who didn't really understand finance, how is it that the company's revenues are increasing, but the cash is decreasing? And so part of what I do as a fractional CFO is to help founders and executives understand what happens with cash and how to manage cash. And what is the implications on your liquidity from various financial decisions, right? And what is it going to take so that companies are not in the same situation? Another problem that can happen if you don't properly plan for what does it mean to grow for a company is that you will not have people hired enough to maintain the new clients, right? If you haven't properly accounted for which positions will need to scale as you bring on more clients, and they will require more support or will require account management or whatever it is, you will maybe be in a situation where those clients grow unhappy and you lose them. Or on the product side, if you drive your demand, but you haven't accounted for your inventory side, where you simply do not have products to ship to them, again, that's not going to be a good situation for you either. So those things are all interconnected and they all need to be thought through. The third aspect, so I would say growth and making sure that the forecasting is done correctly and reporting is done correctly, accounting for cash flow management, working capital management. The third one is what can happen is when the data is recorded is that if it's not recorded correctly, for example, the same cost may need to be allocated amongst different business lines where it may be recorded in a common bucket. If you allocate it incorrectly amongst different business lines, you may have a distorted idea of how profitable those business lines are, and this may lead you to incorrect decisions in terms of whom to hire for those departments. That has happened to my other client that had, some model, but it was completely incorrectly implemented in the financial systems, and the systems were showing that some departments were making money when in fact they were losing money. And it's only because they had a lot of cash generated from their activities that they did not go bankrupt, because they made mistakes on the recording of the data side across everything you can possibly think of. And so that's something that's all part of the financial management cycle. You create the plan, which is the financial model. You make sure it's implemented correctly. All the systems are integrated. And then, of course, you need to reconcile that plan, right? You need to understand, okay, so now that we have executed in our plan, what has happened? What does the data tell us? How do we need to change it? Unless all those three things are in place and all parts of the business are correctly linked together, you can't really run your business efficiently. Now, maybe you'll get lucky. Some people only have an accountant and a bookkeeper. And if their business is simple, like a consulting business, you need a CFO. If you're a freelancer, you don't need a CFO to do it. You may need a marketing person to help you with marketing and business development. But if you are a business that sells something, once you reach a certain level of sales, if you don't have somebody helping you to think through how to grow it further and making sure that you account for all of the complexity and the interdependencies, you may just not doing yourself or your company a favor, just not maximizing your potential.
So what's it like to buy your first cryptocurrency on Kraken? Well, let's say I'm at a food truck I've never tried before. Am I going to go all in on the loaded taco? No, sir. I'm keeping it simple, starting small. That's trading on Kraken. Pick from over 190 assets and start with the $10 in your pocket. Easy. Go to Kraken.com and see what crypto can be. Not investment advice. Crypto trading involves risk of loss. Cryptocurrency services are provided to U.S. and U.S. territory customers by Payward Interactive Inc., PWI, DBA Kraken. View PWI's disclosures at kraken.com/legal/disclosures.
This episode is brought to you by Global X. Since 2008, Global X ETFs has been committed to empowering investors with unexplored, intelligent solutions. Global X specializes in exchange-traded funds that offer exposure to the artificial intelligence ecosystem, including themes like data centers, robotics, semiconductors, and cloud computing. To learn more about Global X's entire suite of ETFs, from covered calls, fixed income, emerging markets, and more, visit globalxetfs.com.
Yeah, really fascinating. We're at the end with around 8 minutes left. And then so you've actually leveraged to do various different things. You've had various ventures in media entertainment, and then you've experienced with accelerators like Rockstart and Startup. But you've also done World Unite for Ukraine Concert and Power Up. as well as your role in the National Small Business Association. So kind of these things, reflecting on your diverse career, what advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs, especially women we have a lot of women in the audience who are looking to make their mark in the business world?
The biggest advice I would give is not to be afraid. Sometimes, especially we as women, we decide in advance, or any entrepreneur, it's very scary to start doing something with a lot of uncertainty where you don't know if things are going to work out or not. And sometimes we decide in advance, that's not going to work out. I'm not going to reach out. I'm not going to go to this event. I'm never going to meet this person. If you decide that in advance in your brain, of course, it's not going to work out. Of course, you're not going to meet this person. Whereas if you have an approach where I believe in what I'm doing so much that it overrides the how I'm going to do it. Yeah, I will try some things. And every day I will try the most I can to move towards my objectives. And if something doesn't work out, that it's not meant to be this way, I will evaluate what comes back from the market. Very similar to the financial management cycle. And I will then decide what to do next. If you have that approach and redefine your relationship with failure as a relationship with learning of what works and what's not, it will just make it easier to succeed. So I would say one is not to be afraid, not to decide in advance what is possible or not. And the other one, really know what is your driving force. Because when you connect what you really care about, whatever your passion is, and everybody talks about it, and I will give an example from my experience, what it does to you when you connect with it is absolutely incredible. When you connect with it, it's the why becomes bigger than the how, and it just propels you forward. And that's why I was able to produce a concert in 4 months without ever having experience in the music industry or nonprofits or with talent management or music licensing laws, etc. And what happened was that I'm originally from Russia. Last year, the war started between Russia and Ukraine. I felt horrible about the role of Russia and what they were doing in Ukraine. My family is in both countries. My stepfather is a Ukrainian. My ex-husband is a Ukrainian. And I felt very close to the conflict. And as an entrepreneur, I was not satisfied with just giving money to different nonprofits. I wanted to do something that for me would be more meaningful. And I got this idea from a concert after watching another musician do a live stream with another musician, Lviv. And I thought, what a great idea it would be if we had a live stream with musicians from all over the world coming together, not just Russia or Eastern European countries, but everywhere, all the countries, and showing their support from Ukraine and getting the audience from around the world and raising awareness and raising money through ticket sales. And that would give birth to the idea for World Unite for Ukraine. And remember that I called my friend in March, who was an epidemiologist, and I told her, Svetlana, I have this idea for a concert. I have no idea how I'm going to do it, but do you want to help me? And she said, I have no idea how to do it either, but I'll help you. And together we did it. And in 4 months, we got 22 artists from 9 countries. We had a team of 100 volunteers in 11 countries. I don't know how I still maintained my business, as it was in addition to everything I was doing. But when I say you connect with your driving force, I had so much energy. I was so passionate about doing this. It meant so much to me that I don't remember. Of course, I had setbacks, and it was very difficult to do it. There was a lot of stress that had nothing to do with producing the concert, with law, with dealing with a nonprofit, with dealing with some of the personalities on the team. And sometimes I felt maybe I should just stop doing it. But then I also felt that I'm on a train that is accelerating downward and I can't stop. And I didn't stop. And then we produced this concert on the 14th of July. And that remains one of my very proud moments, that it was such a beautiful event that brought so many people together. And we didn't raise as much money as we wanted, but we did raise some money. And it will forever be out there in the world as a testament of our love for Ukraine and how we felt about what was going on at the time. And so my advice to entrepreneurs would be to find something that would make you feel like this. When you feel like this, doesn't matter what happens along the way, you will just make it happen no matter what.
Excellent. And for the audience, let's thank Victoria for coming onto the show. Really interesting. All of her resources will be in the links and show notes. Be sure to follow her on social media. and check up the Startup Nation station as well. And with that, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so much.